There's nothing quite like that moment when your bare foot sinks into something warm and squishy first thing in the morning. That horrifying second when your brain catches up with your toes and you realize, yep, that's definitely fresh dog poop. Now imagine that happening every single day, like clockwork, at 7 a.m. sharp. That became my morning routine thanks to my neighbor Rick. Rick was what you might call a character. The kind of guy who owned more grills than shirts. Who treated his driveway like an open-air bar starting at 10 a.m. Who looked at property lines the same way pirates looked at maritime laws. More like loose guidelines than actual rules. Rick believed in freedom. Freedom for his dog, Duke to roam wherever he pleased. Freedom from wearing shirts in public. And most importantly, freedom from basic human decency. Now, Duke himself was actually a great dog, big, friendly golden retriever, with a tail that could clear a coffee table in one swipe. But Duke had one very specific habit. Every morning, like he was punching a time clock, he'd wander into my yard, find the exact geometric center of my lawn, and drop the most offensive turds you can imagine. Not near the edge, not behind a bush, dead center, like he was planting a flag. At first, I thought maybe Rick didn't realize this was happening. So I walked over one day, all neighborly smiles, and said, "Hey man, Duke's been using my yard as his personal bathroom. Any chance you could keep him on a leash or clean up after him?" Rick took a long pull for his morning beer, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and hit me with this gem. "It's all nature, bro. You don't own the earth." Oh, we're doing this. So I tried all the normal solutions. Patched up the fence. Duke just went around it. Installed motion-activated sprinklers. The dog actually seemed to enjoy them. Rick saw me setting them up and laughed. "Nice try," he said, "but Duke's built different." Well, Rick, turns out so am I, because what happened next wasn't just revenge. It was art. It was public shaming. It was a masterclass in turning someone's own arrogance against them. And it all started with a 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot. Hit subscribe if you've ever looked at a terrible neighbor and thought, I could ruin your life with nothing but glitter and petty determination. Trust me, by the end of the story, you'll never look at dog poop the same way again. Before we get into the beautiful, disgusting details of my revenge, let's take a moment to acknowledge something universal. Every neighborhood has that one neighbor. You know exactly who I'm talking about. The neighbor who parks their rusted project car halfway on your lawn. Who throws parties on weeknights like they're running a nightclub. Who looks at quiet hours like they're just friendly suggestions. The kind of person who treats shared spaces like their personal kingdom, boundaries like they're negotiable, and basic courtesy like it's some radical new concept they haven't tried yet. Maybe yours blasts mariachi music at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Maybe yours borrows tools and forgets to return them for months. Maybe yours lets their dog bark nonstop, like it's being paid by the hour. But we've all had that moment, standing at our window, watching some fresh neighborhood nonsense unfold, fingers tightening into fists, blood pressure rising, that quiet voice in our heads whispering, "Oh, it is on." Well, today's story is for every single person who's ever been there, for everyone who's ever fantasized about the perfect petty revenge, the kind that doesn't just solve the problem, but does it with style, the kind that leaves your terrible neighbor blinking in confusion, wondering how things escalated so beautifully, the kind that makes the rest of the neighborhood nod in silent approval. If you ever want to see justice served with a side of glitter and a sprinkle of public humiliation, smash that like button right now. And if you really want to see how far petty revenge can go when properly motivated, hit subscribe, because what happened next wasn't just satisfying. It was practically an art form. This is for everyone who's ever looked at their terrible neighbor and thought, I could ruin your whole week with nothing but a trip to the craft store and some creative thinking. Trust me, by the time we're done here, you'll be looking at your own neighborhood nuisances in a whole new light. Because here's the thing about people like Rick. They think they're untouchable. They think the rules don't apply to them. And that's exactly what makes watching them get taken down so incredibly sweet. So buckle up, hit that notification bell, and get ready for a revenge story that proves sometimes the best solutions come with googly eyes and a 5-gallon bucket. Let me paint you a picture of my first home. A charming little ranch-style house with a yard just begging for summer barbecues and lazy Sunday afternoons. The kind of place where you could picture kids playing catch and neighbors sharing beers over the fence. At least, that's what I imagined when I signed the papers. Reality had other plans. Specifically, a reality named Rick, who lived directly behind me. Now, Rick wasn't just a bad neighbor. He was a walking stereotype. The kind of guy who looked like he'd been preserved in a vat of cheap beer since 1997. His uniform consisted exclusively of stained tank tops with increasingly ironic slogans. Life's a beach. No pain, no gain. My personal favorite. I'm not drunk, I'm just awesome. His driveway was basically a Coors Light graveyard, with Crushkins forming a sad little monument to poor life choices. But the real star of this tragic comedy was Duke, Rick's massive golden retriever. Now don't get me wrong, Duke was objectively a great dog. Friendly, goofy, the kind of pup who'd knock you over with affection before you could say, bad dog. But Duke had one glaring flaw. His digestive system operated with the precision of a Swiss watch and the devastation of a biological weapon. Every morning, like clockwork, I'd look out my kitchen window to see the same ritual unfold. Duke would come trotting across the property line with the confidence of a conquering hero. He'd pause, sniff the air like a sommelier selecting a fine wine, then plant himself dead center in my lawn, and I mean GPS coordinates level precise center, to deposit what can only be described as an ecological disaster. At first, I assumed this was just an oversight. Surely Rick didn't know his dog was turning my yard into a minefield. So I mustered up my best neighborly demeanor and walked over one Saturday morning. Rick was already 3 beers deep, washing his truck in a way that mostly involved spraying water at random while drinking. "Hey, Rick," I said, all smiles. "I don't know if you've noticed, but Duke's been using my yard as his personal bathroom. Any chance he could keep him on a leash or clean up after him?" Rick took a long, dramatic pull from his beer, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and hit me with the line that would echo in my head for months. "It's all nature, bro. You don't own the earth." I stood there blinking while a single drop of Coors Light rolled down his chin. This wasn't just a refusal. It was a philosophy, a worldview, a declaration of war wrapped in bro-speak. So began what I now call the Great Lawn Wars. Phase 1 was diplomacy. I patched every gap in the fence. Duke just went around. I installed motion-activated sprinklers. The dog actually seemed to enjoy them, prancing to the water like it was his personal splash pad. Rick saw me setting them up and laughed so hard he nearly choked on his vape pen. "Nice try," he wheezed, but Duke's built different. Phase 2 was deterrence. Citrus sprays, commercial repellents, even some home remedy involving cayenne pepper that just made my yard smell like a taco stand. Nothing worked. If anything, Duke seemed to take it as a challenge, leaving even larger offerings like some grotesque game of fecal one-upmanship. The breaking point came when I found Rick watching from his deck one morning, grinning as Duke did his business on my freshly mowed lawn. That's when I realized normal solutions wouldn't work here. This wasn't about training a dog. This was about sending a message. And sometimes messages need to be written in the only language people like Rick understand: public humiliation and petty revenge. Little did Rick know, I wasn't just some pushover neighbor. I was a man with a Home Depot card, too much free time, and a creative streak that could put Martha Stewart to shame. And as I stood there watching Duke trot away from his latest masterpiece, I made a silent vow. By the time I was done, Rick would wish he'd bought a pooper scooper. The day Operation Golden Retriever Revenge commenced started like any other, with Duke leaving his morning gift right in the center of my lawn. But this time, instead of grumbling and reaching for the shovel, I smiled, because today marked the beginning of the end. I marched to Home Depot and bought the most beautiful orange bucket I'd ever seen. 5 gallons of pure potential. I lined it carefully with heavy-duty trash bags, creating what I like to call my special collection device. Every morning when Duke made his deposit, I'd suit up in rubber gloves and carefully transfer his artwork to the bucket. A splash of water here, a gentle stir there. I was basically making the world's worst soup. After 2 weeks of diligent collecting, I had created something truly special. The contents of that bucket had achieved a consistency somewhere between pudding and toxic waste. The smell could peel paint. It was perfect. I waited for the perfect moment. A Saturday when Rick was out fishing, or more likely, drinking beer in a boat. Under cover of twilight, I went to work. This wasn't just dumping. This was an artistic statement. I carefully ladled a mixture along the perimeter of his deck, ensuring it would bake into the wood in the summer heat. I created a delicate border around his precious fire pit area. I even dotted some along his driveway, like some grotesque version of Hansel and Gretel's breadcrumbs. The next morning, I positioned myself on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee, waiting for the show to begin. Right on schedule, Rick stumbled out onto his deck in his usual morning uniform, boxers, and a headache. The moment his bare feet hit the treated wood, his face went through an entire journey. Confusion, realization, horror. He actually dry heaved. "What the hell is that smell?" he bellowed to no one in particular. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Smells like nature, bro." The look on his face was worth every disgusting minute of bucket stirring. But phase one was just a warm-up. Our neighborhood Facebook group became my stage. I started posting daily lost and found notices with increasing creativity. Found! One abstract organic sculpture near the hydrangeas. Artist appears to work exclusively in shades of brown. Owner, please collect before the medium liquefies. Missing. Several pounds of biological matter. Last seen being produced at high velocity in my petunias. If found, will not be keeping. The comments section became a gold mine. Neighbors I'd never met were suddenly chiming in with laughing emojis, and "I think I know whose dog that is" messages. The social pressure was building beautifully. Then came my masterpiece, the haiku signs, each one handcrafted with care. Popsicle stick frames, glitter accents, googly eyes that wobbled in the breeze. I planted them throughout my yard like a museum exhibition. "Dear Sir Poops-a-Lot, / your art belongs elsewhere / my lawn resigns. Grass is not buffet / take your fecal cuisine / somewhere more fitting." Rick's eventual meltdown was everything I dreamed of. He stormed across our yards, his face the same shade as his no fear tattoo. "Are you trying to make me look bad?" he screamed, spittle flying. I let the question hang in the air for a perfect beat. "Buddy," I said calmly, "I don't need to try. You're doing that all by yourself." The best part? Our other neighbors had started coming forward with their own Duke stories. Turns out my yard wasn't the only one he'd been blessing. The tide was turning, and Rick was suddenly the neighborhood pariah, all thanks to some craft supplies, strategic Facebook posts, and one very special bucket of revenge. The tide turned faster than I could have imagined. What started as my personal vendetta became a neighborhood movement. Mrs. Henderson from 3 doors down posted security cam footage of Duke leaving a steaming present on her rose bushes. The Jenkins family share how they've been finding surprises in their kid's sandbox. Even old Mr. Peterson, who'd lived on the block for 40 years, came forward about his azaleas being used as Duke's personal rest stop. Rick's reputation crumbled overnight. The guy who used to be the life of every block party was now getting side-eyed at the mailbox. Neighbors who used to wave at him now crossed the street. His usual crew of drinking buddies suddenly found reasons to be busy when he came knocking. The final straw came at the neighborhood association meeting. Normally, these were sleepy affairs about garbage collection schedules, but this one turned into an impromptu tribunal. 6 different households presented evidence of Duke's contributions to their properties. The association president, a no-nonsense retired judge, fixed Rick with a look that could freeze lava. "Mr. Thompson," she said in that calm, terrifying way authority figures have, "either you control your animal or we'll have animal control do it for you." 2 days later, contractors showed up at Rick's place. The sound of power tools and hammering echoed through the neighborhood as they installed a brand new regulation height dog run in his backyard. The kind with proper fencing, a gravel base, and, I kid you not, a little poop bag dispenser mounted on the post. The first time I saw Rick walking Duke on an actual leash, I nearly choked on my coffee. There he was, the man who once claimed leashes are for communists, using a proper harness and everything. Duke seemed confused but happy. He got extra walkies now, just in more appropriate locations. As for me, well, I kept up the haiku sign for a while, not out of spite, but because the neighborhood kids loved them. They started making their own versions and leaving them around the block. There's something beautiful about watching 8-year-olds craft poems about responsible pet ownership. These days, my lawn is pristine. The only things decorating it are fireflies on summer evenings and the occasional fallen leaf. Rick and I have reached an understanding. We gnawed at each other from a safe distance, and he keeps Duke firmly on his own property. The moral of the story? Sometimes justice doesn't come from courts or lawyers. Sometimes it comes from a 5-gallon bucket, some craft supplies, and the collective power of annoyed neighbors. And the sweetest victory isn't just winning. It's sitting on your porch on a quiet morning, sipping coffee, and breathing air that smells like fresh-cut grass instead of canine catastrophe. Though I do keep that Home Depot bucket in my garage, just in case. Old habits die hard. If this story made you cackle with delight like a Disney villain who just got away with something, do me a solid, smash that like button until your thumb hurts. And if you're the kind of person who appreciates justice served with a side of glitter, hit subscribe, because we got plenty more stories where this came from. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. What's the most deliciously petty revenge you've ever served up? Maybe you return a noisy neighbor's energy by learning the drums at 6 a.m.? Turn a parking spot thief's car into a modern art installation with post-it notes? Whatever your story is, I want all the glorious details. And for those of you wondering about the aftermath, yes, Rick and I have reached an understanding. These days when we pass each other, there's a mutual nod of respect, and just the slightest hint of fear in his eyes when he sees me carrying anything from Home Depot. As for Duke, he's living his best life with regular walks and a proper place to do his business, though I do catch him glancing longingly at my lawn sometimes. Old habits die hard, for both of us. So remember, kids, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. But when life gives you irresponsible neighbors, make art, preferably the kind that smells terrible and comes with googly eyes. This has been your friendly neighborhood revenge connoisseur signing off. Don't forget to ring that notification bell. You never know when inspiration for the perfect payback might strike. And as always, keep a bucket handy. You never know when you might need it.